Am I the asshole for excluding my ex's new girlfriend? The question stayed with me like a low hum in the back of my mind, echoing every time I glanced at the orange pumpkin light strung across my front porch. Chicago in late October had a special bite to it. The air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves and roasted peanuts from the vendors down on Michigan Avenue, and every neighborhood block seemed to be alive with jack-o'-lanterns and skeleton decorations swaying in the wind. For me, Halloween had always been about my daughter, Emma. She was 9 now, but I could still picture her toddling down the street years ago in a too-big pumpkin costume, her tiny fists clutching her candy bucket like it was treasure. Over the years, costumes had changed, from princess dresses to superheroes to last year's witch outfit, but one thing stayed the same. Halloween night was hers. This year she was going as a vampire. She had carefully picked the outfit from a thrift shop on Belmont Avenue, insisting she wanted it to be authentic and not like the plastic-looking ones from chain stores. She practiced her evil laugh in the mirror until I thought my neighbors might call to check if everything was okay. I loved watching her excitement bubble over, loved knowing she'd be running down the sidewalks with her best friend Lily, who lived just 2 blocks away. But then my phone buzzed, and everything grew complicated again. It was David, my ex-husband. He had been calling more lately, ever since Stephanie had entered the picture. His texts used to be short, blunt, logistical. Pick up at 5, or Emma's soccer game Saturday, I'll be there. But now his messages carried extra weight, requests wrapped in explanations. This time it read, "Hey, so about Halloween. I was thinking of bringing Stephanie and her girls along with Emma. That way we can all do it together. What do you think?" I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. Stephanie, and her 2 daughters, ages 4 and 5. I had met them briefly at a birthday party, and while they were sweet enough, they were also clingy, whiny, and demanded a lot of attention. That was natural for their age, sure, but Emma wasn't used to it. She'd whispered to me more than once after visits, "Mom, they never stop talking," or, "They always want my stuff," her voice a mix of annoyance and guilt. I wanted to protect Emma's space, her time, her Halloween. So I wrote back, choosing my words carefully, "No, I don't think that's a good idea. Halloween is my custody time, and Emma already has plans with Lily and her family. I want her to enjoy the night without feeling like she has to entertain the little ones." His reply came fast, like he'd been waiting for my answer. "So you're excluding Stephanie? That's not fair. She doesn't have many friends, and it would mean a lot for her to be part of this. Why can't you just include them?" I felt my jaw tighten as I typed back. "This isn't about Stephanie. This is about Emma. She deserves to have time with her best friend, without being pulled into a blended family situation every single time. They're not her siblings, David. Not yet, maybe not ever. She needs her own space." No response came after that. Just the silent dots that disappeared, then nothing. That night, after Emma went to bed, I sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me, staring at the flicker of the candles I had set inside 2 pumpkins we carved together. The apartment was quiet except for the muffled sound of a red line train rattling past. I thought about Stephanie, about the way she smiled too quickly when I met her, the way she clutched her daughter's hands like she was afraid they might float away. I didn't dislike her, but I didn't want my daughter's childhood memories to become a constant balancing act between families either. Emma deserved time that wasn't shared. I remembered my own childhood Halloweens in the suburbs outside of Chicago, running through the crisp night air with my friends, trading candy on the sidewalk, laughing until our faces hurt. My parents divorced when I was young, too, but my mom had fought to keep some traditions just mine. She told me once, "You don't need to share every piece of yourself to prove you're kind." I had carried that lesson with me. The next weekend, David came by to pick Emma up. He stood in my doorway, his hands shoved in the pockets of his jacket, his voice edged with frustration. "You know, you're making this harder than it needs to be." I crossed my arms. "I'm not making it harder. I'm making it fair to Emma. She doesn't always have to be the big sister. She doesn't always have to adjust. She likes Stephanie," he countered. "She said it herself. And her girls look up to Emma. It would be good for all of them." I glanced at Emma, who was zipping up her backpack, pretending not to listen but definitely listening. "David," I said more softly, "Emma also deserves to run around with Lily and just be a 9-year-old. Not someone's role model, not the older kid in charge, not part of a ready-made family she didn't ask for. Just Emma. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, muttered something about me being stubborn, but he didn't push further. Later, Emma and I sat together on the couch, flipping through a Halloween catalog. She pointed out decorations she liked, circling them with a purple marker as if I might buy every single one. "Mom," she asked suddenly, "is Stephanie coming with us on Halloween?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at her face, the way her eyes darted away like she already knew the answer but wanted to hear it from me. "No, sweetheart. This year, it'll just be you, me, Lily, and her family." Relief flashed across her face before she could hide it. She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. Okay. Good. That small word told me everything. But still, in the back of my mind, David's accusation lingered. Excluding. Was I excluding her? Was I being selfish? Or was I finally drawing the line my daughter needed me to? The week of Halloween arrived, and the city felt alive with energy. Storefronts downtown were decked out with spiderwebs, fake ravens perched on window sills, and every other kid in Emma's school seemed to be buzzing about costumes. At her school's Halloween event, I extended an olive branch. I invited David, Stephanie, and her girls. I watched as Emma walked them around the gym, introducing them to her classmates. She was polite, smiling, even letting the younger girls hold her hand as they looked at the decorated tables. But when the night was over and Emma climbed into my car, she let out a long sigh. "That was a lot." "You did great," I told her. "I like them," she admitted, "but sometimes I just want it to be me." And I thought, yes. Exactly. I drove us home through the streets of Chicago, the skyline glowing in the distance, wondering if maybe, just maybe, protecting that just me space for my daughter didn't make me the asshole at all. But it didn't silence the whisper in the back of my head, the one that grew louder every time David brought up Stephanie. Chicago had a way of amplifying your thoughts. When you were driving down Lakeshore Drive at night, the skyline glittering like a crown on the black water, the city made you feel small. And when you were walking through your neighborhood during the day, dodging strollers and dogs and kids on scooters, the city made you feel like everyone was watching, like you were just another character in somebody else's story. That's how I felt whenever David pressed me about inclusion. Like maybe I wasn't the hero here. Maybe I was the villain in someone else's eyes. The next Saturday, I met up with my friend Rachel at a cafe in Lincoln Square. She was the kind of friend who would always order a scone for the table, but then eat most of it herself. We'd known each other since college, back when we both thought adulthood would be wine nights in cute apartments, not bills and custody schedules. I told her everything. About Halloween, about David's request, about Stephanie. She stirred her latte, eyes narrowing. "You're not wrong," she said finally. "Emma is 9. 9. She deserves her own experiences without being forced to babysit. David's girlfriend can go trick-or-treating somewhere else. Or she can stay home and hand out candy. It's not like Halloween disappears if she doesn't tag along with you." "But he says I'm excluding her," I admitted. "That I should care about the fact she doesn't have friends here." Rachel scoffed. "Since when is that your responsibility? She's an adult. If she's lonely, that's something she needs to work on herself. You don't sacrifice your daughter's childhood so a grown woman doesn't feel left out." I knew Rachel was right. But still, I imagined Stephanie at home, scrolling through her phone while her girls whined about wanting to go out. Maybe she'd see pictures later on social media of Emma laughing with her friend, her candy bucket overflowing. Would she feel hurt? Left behind? I wasn't heartless, but I had to remind myself, Stephanie wasn't my problem. Emma was. That night, after Emma went to bed, I called my mom. She lived up in Evanston and still had a way of grounding me, even when I was spinning in circles. "You're not the bad guy here," my mom said firmly after I spilled the whole story. "Divorce is messy. Blended families are messy. But you're not responsible for making everyone comfortable. You're responsible for your daughter. That's it. Don't let David guilt you into thinking otherwise." Her voice was steady, and it sank into me like a warm blanket. I needed that reminder. The days leading up to Halloween felt like a tug-of-war. David texted me twice more, pressing, asking if I'd reconsider. I stayed firm but polite, repeating that Emma already had plans and that he could join if he wanted, but not with Stephanie and the girls. His last message was curt, "Fine. Whatever." Still, I wondered how Emma processed all of this. One night, she was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, pencil tapping against her worksheet, and out of nowhere she said, "Stephanie's girls are nice. But they always cry when they don't get what they want. It makes everything harder." I leaned on the counter, watching her. "Do you feel like you have to take care of them?" She shrugged. "Sometimes. Dad tells me to be patient because I'm older. But sometimes I just want to play by myself or with Lily." That settled it in my heart. Protecting her space wasn't exclusion. It was parenting. The night before Halloween, I drove us through Andersonville, admiring the way the shops had gone all out with decorations. Ghosts dangled from lampposts, fake cobwebs stretched across bakery windows, and kids ran around in early costumes, giggling. Emma pressed her nose to the window, pointing out her favorites. For a moment, it was just us, no outside noise, no second-guessing. I thought again, maybe, just maybe, holding this line wasn't cruel. Maybe it was love. But still, the question lingered like the echo of footsteps behind you on a dark street. Was I protecting my daughter, or was I closing the door on a family she might eventually have to accept? Maybe it was love. That thought carried me through the week, even when the doubts crept in. But the doubts always came back, creeping in like the wind that slipped through the cracks of my apartment's old windows every October, sharp and cold enough to make you shiver. At work, I caught myself rereading David's last text. Fine. Whatever. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone I knew too well. Short. Dismissive. Punishing. He had used that same tone during our marriage when he wanted me to fold. When he wanted me to feel guilty enough to cave. It worked back then. It doesn't work now. Or at least, I tell myself it doesn't. By Thursday, I met up with Ethan, my coworker who always somehow became my sounding board when life got messy. We sat in a crowded diner on Clark Street, the kind with vinyl booths and pies displayed behind glass. He tore into his burger while I poked at my salad. "So he says you're excluding her," Ethan repeated after I explained the situation. "Tell him to get over it. You're not excluding her from a wedding or Thanksgiving dinner. It's Halloween. Kids' holiday. He wants his girlfriend to trick or treat, she can take her own kids around the block." I smirked, swirling my fork through lettuce leaves. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple," Ethan said, wiping his hands. "You're protecting your daughter's time. That's your job. Not to babysit his new girlfriend's feelings. He's just mad because he doesn't control the situation." His words hit like a pin to a balloon, letting out air I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That night, I walked with Emma down our block, admiring the neighborhood's decorations. A skeleton propped on a porch swing, orange lights strung across railings, fake gravestones stabbed into front lawns. Emma giggled at one house blasting spooky sound effects. She grabbed my hand, her small fingers warm against the chilly air. "Mom?" she asked, voice soft. "Yeah, sweetie. Do I have to spend Halloween with Dad's girlfriend?" Her question cut sharper than any text David had sent. "No," I told her, squeezing her hand. "This year, it's just you and your friend. That's all." She smiled, relief spreading across her face like sunrise. That was the only answer I needed. Still, Friday brought more tension. My phone buzzed with a message from Madison, another mom from Emma's school. We weren't close, but our kids had shared classrooms for years, and she was always quick to weigh in on parenting dilemmas. "I heard from David that you said no to trick-or-treating together," she wrote. "I think you might want to rethink it. It's good for kids to feel like one family, even if it's awkward at first." I stared at the message, frustration rising in my chest. Why did David think it was okay to recruit outside opinions against me? Why did everyone else get to have an opinion on what my daughter needed? I typed out a careful reply. "I appreciate your thoughts, but I'm not asking Emma to blend every tradition overnight. One night for her friend isn't going to destroy a family dynamic. I didn't hit send right away. I read it over 3 times, then finally pressed send. My hands trembled after, but I didn't regret it. That night, when Emma went to bed, I curled up on the couch with a blanket and stared out at the city through my window. Chicago pulsed outside, headlights flashing down the street, voices drifting up from the sidewalk, the rumble of the owl in the distance. Life moved on, noisy and indifferent, no matter how heavy your personal storms felt. And yet, in my quiet apartment, I kept circling back to the same thought. I wasn't excluding Stephanie because I hated her. I wasn't excluding her to punish David. I was carving out space for Emma, making sure her 9-year-old world still had pieces untouched by adult complications. The trouble was, I knew life doesn't stay that simple forever. There would be more events, more blending, more pushback. One day, maybe, Emma would even ask for it herself. But not now. Not this Halloween. So when Saturday morning came, with the October air sharp enough to sting your nose, and Emma bounced out of her room already chattering about costumes, I knew I was ready to stand firm. Maybe protecting her joy didn't make me the asshole. Maybe it made me her mother. The night air carried that perfect balance of crispness and chaos that only Halloween in the city could deliver. Kids in costumes swarmed the sidewalks, their laughter bouncing off the brick walls of apartment buildings, their plastic pumpkins clattering with every piece of candy dropped inside. Porch lights glowed orange, fake spiderwebs stretched across railings, and a steady stream of parents trailed behind with coffee cups or thermoses, trying to keep up. Emma was a shimmering witch, her black dress brushing just above her sneakers, a glittery purple hat tilting over her curls. Beside her, Sophie, her best friend since kindergarten, wore a vampire cape that kept slipping from her shoulders. The two of them darted from one decorated porch to another, their voices shrill with joy. I walked behind them with Sophie's mom, Carla, who'd been kind enough to split supervision duties with me. She was relaxed, sipping from her travel mug, and every so often she'd chuckle at the girls' dramatic shrieks. "This is good," Carla said, adjusting her scarf. "They're at the age where the magic still matters. Next year, they'll probably just want to sit on TikTok and eat candy they bought themselves." I laughed softly, though part of me couldn't help glancing down the block. Each cluster of kids blurred together, but I half expected David's tall frame to appear at any corner. And then, he did. I spotted him first, standing at the corner under a street lamp. His coat collar flipped up, hands shoved into his pockets. And next to him, unmistakable, was Stephanie, wearing cat ears and a black sweater dress, her smile wide and effortless. My stomach tightened, but I forced my face neutral. This was Emma's night, not mine. The girls saw them seconds later. Emma froze mid-step, candy bag clutched to her chest. Sophie tugged at her arm, whispering something I couldn't catch, but Emma didn't move. Her eyes flicked between me and her father. David walked forward, a half-smile on his face that looked more forced than usual. "Hey," he said, his voice raised just enough to be heard over the chatter around us. "Looks like you're having fun." Emma mumbled something, her shoulders stiff. Stephanie crouched down immediately, her cat ears tilting as she reached toward Emma's bag. "Wow, look at that haul already. You're gonna need another bag soon." Emma hugged her pumpkin tighter. "It's fine," she whispered. The silence that followed felt like a spotlight, bright, heavy, exposing. Kids in costumes brushed past us, parents called out for their children, and yet in that moment, it felt like the entire block narrowed to just us. I bent down slightly, touching Emma's arm. "Hey," I said softly. "You and Sophie want to try the next house?" Her eyes darted to mine, pleading. She nodded quickly, tugging Sophie away from the awkward cluster. Carla cleared her throat, ever the peacemaker. "We'll keep moving with the girls," she said, giving me a quick look before shepherding them forward. That left me standing face to face with David and Stephanie, the street lamp humming overhead. Really? David muttered, his jaw tight. You couldn't make this easier. I inhaled, keeping my voice even. I didn't tell you not to come. I said I wanted her to have space tonight. That's not the same as banning you. Stephanie's smile faltered. She looked between us, clearly uncomfortable, then shifted her weight. I don't want to make this harder, she said softly. I just thought, maybe it'd be good for her to see us all together. Her words were kind, but the way Emma had recoiled played on repeat in my mind. Maybe one day, I said firmly, my throat tight. But not tonight. For a moment, none of us moved. Then David exhaled sharply, like he was swallowing back the fight. Fine. Whatever. Enjoy your night. He turned, already heading back toward the corner, his shoulders rigid. Stephanie hesitated, biting her lip, then followed him without another word. I stood still, my pulse drumming in my ears. The air smelled like damp leaves and chocolate, the sounds of laughter echoing around me, and yet all I could feel was the weight of that brief confrontation pressing down. When I finally caught up with Carla and the girls, Emma slipped her hand into mine without saying a word. That small gesture told me everything. The night ended with candy wrappers crumpled on the coffee table and Emma asleep on the couch, still clutching her plastic pumpkin like a treasure chest. I draped a blanket over her and stood there for a moment, watching her chest rise and fall. She looked so peaceful, so far removed from the tension that had shadowed her evening. But I knew that peace was fragile, and it wouldn't last long. The first vibration on my phone came just after midnight. I had barely brushed my teeth when I saw David's name light up the screen. The message was short, clipped, and loaded. Thanks for making me look like an outsider in my own kid's life. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. Another ping followed. She's 9. She should see her parents and my partner getting along. Instead, you're teaching her to divide loyalties. For a long moment, I didn't reply. I let the words sit there, glowing in the dark like little sparks threatening to ignite something bigger. Finally, I typed back, this isn't about loyalty. It's about giving her a night that didn't feel like a performance. She deserves that. No response. Just silence. But silence with David never lasted. By the next morning, the flood came. Paragraphs. Long, winding paragraphs about fairness, about modern families, about how I was clinging to the past instead of moving forward. He even dropped in a line about real co-parenting, like he was quoting from some manual he thought would win the argument. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I sipped my coffee and reread Emma's smile from the night before, the way she had clung to my hand after the confrontation. That was the truth I trusted. Not David's version. Not Stephanie's hopeful smile. Just Emma's wordless plea. Still, the whispers found their way in. Carla texted me later that day. I ran into David at the grocery store. He seemed upset. Are you two okay? And then came my sister, Michelle, who had always been more blunt. I get protecting Emma, but don't make Stephanie your enemy. That's a losing game. Enemy. The word clung to me all afternoon. I hadn't wanted that. I didn't hate Stephanie, truthfully, she seemed nice enough. But nice wasn't the same as necessary. Not yet. By evening, the guilt began to creep in, not because I thought I was wrong, but because that's what guilt does when you're a mother balancing on a tightrope of choices. Every step felt like a chance to tumble, not for myself, but for my daughter. Later that night, when Emma was brushing her teeth, she suddenly paused in the doorway. Her witch's hat was still lying on the couch, bent from the night's adventures. "Mom?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Yes, honey." Dad looked sad. Was it because of me? The question hit like a punch. I knelt down, meeting her eyes. No. Absolutely not. You didn't do anything wrong. Her shoulders slumped in relief, but her eyes searched mine, as if she wanted me to prove it. And in that moment, I realized just how dangerous this was, not the argument with David, not the awkwardness with Stephanie, but the possibility of Emma carrying a weight that was never meant for her small shoulders. After she went to bed, I sat in the dark living room, scrolling back through the texts with David, through the messages from friends and family, through my own doubts. And still, one thought kept circling back, relentless and unshakable. Was I protecting Emma, or was I just protecting myself? The night ended with candy wrappers crumpled on the coffee table and Emma asleep on the couch, still clutching her plastic pumpkin like a treasure chest. I draped a blanket over her and stood there for a moment, watching her chest rise and fall. She looked so peaceful, so far removed from the tension that had shadowed her evening. But I knew that peace was fragile, and it wouldn't last long. The first vibration on my phone came just after midnight. I had barely brushed my teeth when I saw David's name light up the screen. The message was short, clipped, and loaded. Thanks for making me look like an outsider in my own kid's life. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. Another ping followed. She's 9. She should see her parents and my partner getting along. Instead, you're teaching her to divide loyalties. For a long moment, I didn't reply. I let the words sit there, glowing in the dark like little sparks threatening to ignite something bigger. Finally, I typed back, "This isn't about loyalty. It's about giving her a night that didn't feel like a performance. She deserves that." No response. Just silence. But silence with David never lasted. By the next morning, the flood came. Paragraphs. Long, winding paragraphs about fairness, about modern families, about how I was clinging to the past instead of moving forward. He even dropped in a line about real co-parenting, like he was quoting from some manual he thought would win the argument. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I sipped my coffee and reread Emma's smile from the night before, the way she had clung to my hand after the confrontation. That was the truth I trusted. Not David's version. Not Stephanie's hopeful smile. Just Emma's wordless plea. Still, the whispers found their way in. Carla texted me later that day. I ran into David at the grocery store. He seemed upset. "Are you two okay?" And then came my sister, Michelle, who had always been more blunt. "I get protecting Emma, but don't make Stephanie your enemy. That's a losing game." Enemy. The word clung to me all afternoon. I hadn't wanted that. I didn't hate Stephanie, truthfully, she seemed nice enough. But nice wasn't the same as necessary. Not yet. By evening, the guilt began to creep in, not because I thought I was wrong, but because that's what guilt does when you're a mother balancing on a tightrope of choices. Every step felt like a chance to tumble, not for myself, but for my daughter. Later that night, when Emma was brushing her teeth, she suddenly paused in the doorway. Her witch's hat was still lying on the couch, bent from the night's adventures. "Mom?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Yes, honey." Dad looked sad. Was it because of me? The question hit like a punch. I knelt down, meeting her eyes. "No. Absolutely not. You didn't do anything wrong." Her shoulders slumped in relief, but her eyes searched mine, as if she wanted me to prove it. And in that moment, I realized just how dangerous this was, not the argument with David, not the awkwardness with Stephanie, but the possibility of Emma carrying a weight that was never meant for her small shoulders. After she went to bed, I sat in the dark living room, scrolling back through the texts with David, through the messages from friends and family, through my own doubts. And still, one thought kept circling back, relentless and unshakable. Was I protecting Emma, or was I just protecting myself? By Thursday, the silence had curdled into something unbearable. David hadn't called, hadn't asked about Emma's homework, hadn't even sent his usual Wednesday night goodnight text. For years, even through divorce, that had been the one thing we kept consistent. And now it was gone. Friday morning, Emma tugged at her backpack straps on the way to school, her little sneakers crunching over the scattered leaves. "Mom," she asked, hesitant, "is Daddy mad at me?" The question lodged in my throat. "No, sweetheart. He's just busy. But kids have radar for lies." Her brow furrowed, and she kicked at a pile of leaves with a little too much force. I wanted to scoop her up and carry her the rest of the way, shield her from every complicated adult emotion. But she was 9, not 5. She'd outgrown being carried, and I had to face the fact that she'd soon outgrow my excuses, too. That evening, David finally showed up at my door. Not a text, not a call, he came in person, Stephanie at his side. The knock was sharp, impatient. When I opened the door, the October wind blew in first, cool and biting, like it carried the tension between us. David stood stiff, jaw set, hands in his jacket pockets. Stephanie was just behind him, arms crossed, trying to look calm but clearly bracing herself. "We need to talk," he said flatly. Emma was in her room, music humming softly from her tablet. I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me, the porch light casting a pale glow over us. David didn't waste a second. "Do you realize what you did to her? To us? Halloween was supposed to be family time, and you made it into a scene." I crossed my arms. "Family time. She's 9, David. She wanted a night with her best friend. That doesn't make her selfish, it makes her a kid. You keep pushing this blended family thing like it's a switch we can flip overnight." Stephanie shifted, her voice cautious but firm. "I'm not trying to replace you. I know my girls can be, a lot. But I'm trying here. It feels like you don't want me in the picture at all." Her words stung, not because they were entirely wrong, but because they hit too close to the truth I didn't want to admit. "This isn't about you," I snapped. "It's about Emma. She deserves to breathe without constantly adjusting to your kids. She deserves space that's just hers." David's eyes flashed. "Space. Or walls? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're building walls just to keep me out." The words cut deep, sharper than he probably meant. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, leaves scattering across the sidewalk like restless whispers. Finally, I said quietly, "She's my daughter, David. My first responsibility is to her. If that makes me the bad guy in your story, then fine. But I won't apologize for protecting her." Stephanie exhaled, shaking her head. "This isn't sustainable. If we keep pulling her in different directions, she's the one who'll break." The porch light flickered, and I realized my hands were trembling. She was right. And yet, every instinct screamed that bending too much now would only teach Emma to sacrifice her comfort for everyone else's. David muttered something under his breath and turned away, his shoulders rigid as he walked back to the car. Stephanie lingered a second longer, her eyes softer than his, but heavy with disappointment. Then she followed him. I stood there on the porch long after the taillights disappeared, the night pressing in around me. Inside, Emma's laughter drifted faintly from her room, innocent and unaware of the storm raging just beyond her door. And I knew, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The weeks after Halloween stretched longer than they should have, each one tinged with the silence between me and David. But eventually, the ice cracked. He called one Sunday morning, his voice calmer than it had been in weeks. "I don't want to fight with you anymore," he said. "Emma deserves better than this." For once, I agreed completely. We met at a cafe in Lincoln Square, neutral ground. The air inside smelled of cinnamon and roasted coffee beans, a welcome break from the bite of November outside. David looked tired, his hair a little messier than usual, but his tone was softer. "I know you're not trying to make this hard," he admitted. I want her to feel like she belongs in both worlds." "She does," I said firmly. "But belonging doesn't mean being swallowed up. She needs time with you. She needs time with me. And when she's ready, she'll open more space for Stephanie and her girls. But it has to be on her terms." He nodded slowly, like he was finally hearing me. "I can live with that." Stephanie joined us halfway through the conversation, sliding into the booth beside him. To my surprise, she didn't come in defensive. She listened, and when she spoke, her voice was measured. "I don't want Emma to resent me," she said. "Or to think my girls are taking something away from her. Maybe I was pushing too hard. Maybe we all were." Something in my chest loosened. For the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel like I was standing on opposite sides of a battlefield. We agreed to a balance. Emma would have protected one-on-one time with her dad every other week, no interruptions, no bonus kids tagging along. On other weekends, the blended family could share activities, but only ones Emma wanted to be part of. When I told Emma later, her face lit up in relief. "So I get both. Just me and Daddy sometimes, and then everyone else other times." "Exactly," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes, and hugged me tight. That hug told me everything. I had made the right choice. By Thanksgiving, the tension had eased. David took Emma to Navy Pier, just the two of them, while I decorated the house with early Christmas lights. When he dropped her back off, she chattered about the Ferris wheel, the cotton candy, and how much fun it was to just hang with Dad. I caught David's eyes over her head. For the first time in a long while, he looked at me not like his ex, not like his rival, but like the person who understood Emma just as well as he did. Maybe that was enough. So no, I wasn't the asshole for excluding his new girlfriend that night. I was a mother, carving out space for my daughter in a world that wanted to pull her in too many directions. And in the end, protecting that space wasn't selfish. It was love.